Hey, Truth Seekers, this is Nurse J again at Nursing the Truth, and I hope you are ready for another mind-blowing video. So, if you recall in the book of Acts, there was a heretic called Simon, and he was with Philip, and they were baptizing people, and he goes, give me that is making all of this happen, and I'll pay you money. And Peter rebukes him and says, get away. And the story goes on. And please forgive me. So, who was this man, Simon Magus, the great heretic that you get the name Simony from in the Catholic Church, Simony, paying money for gifts and underhandedness, right? They're very good at that, the Catholic Church is, even to this day. So, people want to make other people look bad and use them in their own writings. But, truth seekers, what if I was to tell you that Simon Magus of Samaria, a real man in history, and even wrote books, and they have found fragments of his Gnostic writing. He was a disciple of John the Baptist. What, Nurse J? Are you saying that this heretic, this Gnostic man, was a disciple of John the Baptist, but John the Baptist was supposed to usher in God and baptize him? Oh, no, Nurse J, you cannot be telling me this. I'm about to faint. Go look it up. Go look it up, Truth Seekers. I'm just bringing you the message. Don't shoot me, the messenger. So, let me read this to you. Well, also, let me give you this little tidbit. So from what my information is that as John the Baptist was in prison and gonna get his head cut off, though they say, there was a man, like I said, Simon Magus, coming from Alexandria, Egypt. Egypt's always in it some way or another. But Dostinian was also another disciple of John the Baptist. And he had a Gnostic sect called the Dostinians. Look it up. And him and Simon Magus got into a fight. Boy, they were fighting for the rulership. But where does that leave Jesus? See, there's a schism somewhere. There's something not right in this little schism. If you have Simon Magus and Dostinian fighting for the next in line after John the Baptist is getting killed, so therefore you have one of those taking John's place, but you got this Jesus cat out here. There's just too much going on. Now, Epiphanius, okay, he described the so-called Dostinians as Essenes or Ebionite-like. They practiced circumcision, abstained from meat, and fasted. He also said that the Dostinians believed in the resurrection, which is in line with the Essenes and Pharisees, but not to Samaritans, which is where Dostinius appears to be from. Epiphanius described 4 major Samaritan sects: Essenes, Gorthenes, Cebuanines, and Dosthenians. He says that Epiphanius relayed that the Dosthenians kept the festival of unleavened bread, the Passover, Pentecost, and the tabernacles. Interestingly, now listen to me, in Josephus's works, you have to go read his books, The War of the Jews, The Antiquities of the Jews, the complete works. He laid out 19 Jesuses, or Joshua's, or Yeshua's, whatever, that could play all these parts in the Bible. You don't know who the hell you're following, people. But Jesus ben Ananias, as described by Josephus in his War of the Jews, this man came to Jerusalem during the festival of the tabernacles. The building of the tabernacles is referenced in Mark 9 and verse 5. Epiphanius wrote that Dosthenius retired to a cave and fasted so long that he died from the lack of bread and water. But the author says, I generally do not put much stock into Epiphanius' retelling of traditions. But there is an interesting parallel between Jesus going into a cave after his death in the Gospel of Mark 16. Now, you have to read the pseudo-Clementines and the Clementine recognitions and the Clementine homilies. My dear truth seekers, this church puts out a bunch of shit, man. I mean, you got to read this. This is something. According to the Ebionite pseudo-Clementines, Dosthenius was a follower of John the Baptist. After John died, Simon Magus and Dosthenius battled for supremacy of the sect. Do you not understand this? I mean, the magnitude of this. I mean, Jesus Christ. You know, let me go tell the church people, hey, hello, Acts, Simon, Simony, Peter rebukes him. He's the heretic that you all been told he was the devil. Did you know he was a friend of John the Baptist? What would my little Christian friends think then? According to the text, Dosthenius beat Simon Magus with a rod, but the rod passed through him, and Dosthenius then acknowledged Simon was the standing one. To which Simon responded, I am. Which perhaps refers to the I am statements in the Gospel of John. Now in the story, Dosthenius submitted to Simon's authority and died soon after. Okay, so you had John died, Simon and Dosthenius fought. Dosthenius gave it up to Simon. Simon ruled after John, and Dosthenius was under Simon's authority. John, Simon, Dosthenius. You have the Simonians, which followed Simon, and you had Dosthenius, and his sect was called the Dosthenians. Go look it up. You don't believe me? God, please look it up. Simonians, Dosthenians. They had like over 50 Gnostic sects of the first century. I challenge you, my friends. I challenge you to look this up. Simon Magus. some say is a doppelganger for the Apostle Paul, which explains why the Ebionites advanced their polemical traditions of Simon Magus. The author says, I have made the case, in which I made a video on this. Paul, Simon Magus, and Simon of Cyrene were all the same person. But I made a video talking about Apollonius Satiana and Paul, and Jesus made me the same person. But anyway, you can go look that up. Now, the Basilian tradition, which relied on the Gospel of Mark, put forward that Simon of Cyrene inherited the Christ prior to Jesus' crucifixion. In other words, Simon of Cyrene was a paraclete. Later, Paulinists, the Valentinians, and Marcionites agreed that Paul/Simon Magus was the paraclete. If you go to the book of Mark and the crucifixion scenes, it does not say that Jesus was crucified. It says that Simon of Cyrene took the cross, and they parted his garments, and they crucified him, and they gave him the stuff to drink. Look it up. I dare you. Now, the author says, my speculation is that Acts of the Apostles 8 and the Acts of Apostles 13 tell analogous stories of heretical magicians interrupting the proto-orthodoxy. In Acts 13, the sorcerer was an assistant to the governor in Cyrene. Now, if Simon Magus and Paul are the same person, does that mean Christianity's origins are Samaritan? Was John the Baptist, was he the original figurehead? If the answers to these questions are yes, they have much explanatory value. This explains why John the Baptist was so prominently featured in the Gospels and why the authors felt so inclined to point out that John led the way to Jesus' authority. It also helps to explain cooling tensions between Jews and Samaritans throughout the Gospels, particularly in the Gospel of John. You see, quote unquote, when these tribes split up, you had the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin that lived in Judea. And then you had the other 10 tribes in Samaria, the Samaritans, okay, in the northern area. And you see the Jordan is over there in the Samarian area. It also explains why there were ongoing references to Theudas, who resembles John the Baptist, my dear truth seekers. Theudas is referenced in Acts of the Apostles, and he was also said to have been Paul's, aka Simon Magus's, disciples, and revealed Paul's key to the mystery to Valentinus, the Valentinians. In other words, Theudas/John the Baptist was a follower of Paul, Simon Magus, and later revealed Paul's wisdom to the Gnostic Valentinians. Interesting, accordingly to Irenaeus, which was a church father, the Valentinians were copious consumers of the Gospel of John. Now, Church Father Irenaeus, he says, at present, however, I have simply been led to mention him, that thou mightest know that all those who in any way corrupt the truth and affect the preaching of the church are the disciples and successors of Simon Magus of Samaria. And let's read this again. Oh, okay. He's saying that the disciples of Simon Magus, they corrupt the truth. And this was stated in Irenaeus's Against Heresies, Book 1, Chapter 27. But you know what's funny is Irenaeus's words reveal a strong anti-Simon view. And Irenaeus wrote over 100 years after Simon would have died. So this polemic appears to have originated in the New Testament, which depicts hostility between Jerusalem Christians and Samaritans, especially in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 10, verse 5, where Jesus instructs his apostles to avoid Samaria. Woo! So, is this a tension between dun 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 dun? Is this tension between John the Baptist's dude duking it out with Jesus? I have to make some funny, gestures every now and then, because that's just how Nurse J is. She likes to spice it up a little bit. It could have been. I mean, think about it. Simon going to Samaria. Jesus avoid Samaria. Huh. Okay. The 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions: do not go onto the road of the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. So first of all, Christianity, okay, or whatever this thing is. The Gentiles were the freaking Romans. Like, what the hell? I mean, like, really? It was Roman occupation. It was Roman military. Do you think by one stretch of imagination that Jesus would, or this dude was going to send out apostles or disciples to the freaking Gentiles that were worshiping freaking Mithras and Zoroaster and Zeus and Jupiter? They knew better. We're going to do that. Plus, he was talking about Judea. He wasn't going to the freaking North Kingdom. They were dealing with Judea. He didn't give a damn about the northern tribe. What is wrong with you people? Okay, so decades after Matthew was written, the Gospel of John, chapter 4, eased Jerusalem, Samaria tensions via Jesus' interaction with the Samaritan woman. But to the sect which produced the Gospel of Matthew, presumably the Ebionites and later the Nazarenes who added the virgin birth, the Samaritans were bad news. The semi-fictional Simon Magus, described in Acts of the Apostles of 8:9-24, personifies this anti-Samaritan sentiment. Simon, a Samaritan magician who attempted to buy access to apostolic privilege from John and Peter, lays a proverbial seed for his later heresies. Now, for some time, a man named Simon had practiced sorcery in the city and amazed all the people of Samaria. Simon himself believed and was baptized. He says, "Give me also this ability so that everyone on whom I lay my hands may receive the Holy Spirit." And Peter answered, "May your money perish with you." Then Simon answered, "Pray to the Lord for me so that nothing you have said may happen to me." That's a bullshit. The same Simon. This is why it's important for you to read Josephus. The same Simon appears as a historical character. Antiquities, book 20 and paragraph 7 says, At the time when Felix was procurator of Judea, he beheld her, and inasmuch as she surpassed all other women in beauty, he conceived a passion for the lady. He sent to her one of his friends, a Cyprian Jew named Simon, who pretended to be a magician in an effort to persuade her to leave her husband and to marry Felix. The $1,000,000 question, of course, is, did the author of Acts know the person they referenced, or were these Josephus's reference simply part of their encryption? Which I do believe that was the encryption. My suspicion is the latter, which puts me on the opposite side of very knowledgeable scholars such as Robert Eisman. The exchange between Peter and John and Simon bears a striking resemblance to an encounter Paul described in his epistle to the Galatians 2:10, and it says, "And they ask what that we should continue to remember the poor, the very thing I had been eager to do all along. Then after 14 years I went up into Jerusalem. I went in response to revelation as for those who were held high in esteem. Whatever they were makes no difference to me. God does not show favoritism. James, Cephas, and John, those esteemed as pillars, gave me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship when they recognized the grace given to me. When Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him face to face because he stood condemned. For before certain men came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles, but when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. And the other Jews joined him in his hypocrisy." See, Josephus claims that Simon pretended to be a magician was no doubt intended as a swipe against Simon. It was in this spirit that the early Christian authors borrowed this marginal charlatan for use as their father of all heresies. To reiterate, my conjecture is that the name Simon Magus was used as an encryption for someone else, that Josephus' encryption mechanism was common among early Christian writers and can be found in the Gospel of Mark, Revelation, Acts of the Apostle. I elaborate on the motif in Jesus and Jesus ben Ananias. Search for truth seekers. Have a great day.